Okay, so good evening, Shalom, and so we're in our Shmita class, and we have a guest today, which Ilara is going to introduce, and we're going to talk a bit about permaculture and how that kind of creates a conversation between what we're talking about in Shmita and some other practices, and maybe we'll be able to start or continue exploring how Shmita could potentially make sense here in Alberta, okay, in Edmonton. So, because that's where we're going towards. So, Ilara, maybe you can introduce Jerry, our guest, and then Jerry will
Sure.
take us from there.
Yeah, so I'm just basically reading off of Jerry's bio, but Jerry is a biologist who's a member that I know from Westwood Unitarian, and my friend Mike recommended him because he's the go-to for permaculture at Westwood. So he's got a BSc in biological sciences from the University of New Brunswick and a PhD from Cornell University. And he has worked as an analytical ecologist for the federal government in multiple departments. He retired from paid employment in about 2001 with several biological federal departments, worked in an AEF radio ecology program in '64, which used western gophers and eastern chipmunks as analogs for the human population to measure the effect of sublethal doses of cesium, correct me, cesium 137 on mammals. Yeah, so he's well versed in permaculture, and I have, he's also one of our main gardeners in our Westwood community garden. So he's been helping design that garden along with Mike and a few other folks. So I have a slideshow from Jerry, so I'm gonna just open it up, and Jerry, I'll just maybe let you know, since I know you can't see your slides, I'll just let you know where we're at. But the first one is the map, and it's food prices and climate warming. So I'll just let you go on ahead, and I'm just gonna bring that slide up right now.
Okay. I can actually bring it up on my laptop right here as well.
Oh, good. So then you can just let me know when to switch to the next one. That's perfect, Jerry.
Yeah, give me a minute here. I've got to
sure
sort of find out where my...
Yeah, because it's your email, your internet.
Where my thing went. There it is there. Well, Ilara asked me to address the permaculture and how crop rotation, fallow crops, are integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about potatoes as one that I'm very familiar with, and explain why. But first I'm going to say on the permaculture, well, I'm going to say first that I've actually been a gardener since I was about 7 or 8. And then I went into agriculture and spent time there with them. And I was the phytosanitary officer here in Edmonton for all different kinds of plant problems for the federal government. I'm going to say a few things now about permaculture. I never used that term before, so I decided I would look it up, and I found there's a permaculture for every type of growing. So they all use a set of principles, and you can find all of those if you just Google permaculture and pick your choice. But the principles have been around for years. They've just sort of been organized and made to be permaculture, called permaculture. So the generalizations I'm going to make are... Well, let me just make a comment first on my history. After leaving UNB, I went directly to Cornell for the PhD, studied in forest soils and statistics, later used my math skills, for which I had 8 teachers and mentors including my daughter, who developed similar skills in environmental psychology. And we used to spend a couple hours at a time when she was going to school discussing things. Now, the knowledge of soils I found easier because it was real interesting, learning how our thin and young soils since the time of glaciation, 12 to 13,000 years ago, have changed, how those soils have changed. I've studied global soils and soils of North America and how their processes of formation have worked, namely climate, temperature, and rainfall. And also the change in bilatitude going from south to north, or vice versa, and geology underneath. I've dug soil pits to look at soil layers, recycled deciduous leaves in my gardens for many years, and I say deciduous, not coniferous leaves, because they tend to make the soil acid, and you don't want that. Our soils here in the West are very naturally right around 7 or so pH, so they're sort of neutral, and they are called Chernozems, which you will see. I've got to yet pull up that, click out some of this other stuff, and see if I can find where is it here? Oh, there it is, right there.
Jerry, is it okay if we interrupt with questions? Or would you rather do your...
Well, I'm just about done
should
that.
we hold those?
Yeah, give me another couple of minutes here while that thing's loading. Yeah, food prices and climate warming. There it is right there. So that's loading, and you can ask questions as we go through this thing. Okay, but let me just finish here. Clay chemistry changes due to mineralization. By mineralization, I mean the effect of oxygen in our environment on the chemistry of this very, very old, very, very young clay that we have in Western soils. It's called montmorillonite. So soils further south, going down into the States and into the tropics, have been around at higher temperatures for a longer time because they were never glaciated. And so kaolinite, the very red soils of North Carolina and elsewhere in the tropics, Africa and so forth, the ability of the soil depends on the clay in order to keep the minerals needed by plants. And so that's part of the reason why the vegetation changes from north to south. The clay we have here, as I've said, is the Chernozem, which is basically called the black soil, if you understand Russian. It tends to soak up a lot of water and hold it, but when it dries out, it cracks. So it makes it a difficult soil to work and keep in good tilth so that the roots of plants can grow well in it. When I checked the specific literature on permaculture, the principles are applied in all mediums for soils, water, and artificial media for growing. And so I can talk about the potato things a little bit there.
Did you want me to switch the slide over, Gary?
Yeah, you could. Let's go through the slides, okay?
Okay, so here's the next one. So that kind of hit that already, your qualifications and experience.
Okay. So this thing I made in 2018 to give to a group of students in the Bourneville High School who were very keen on learning all this kind of stuff. So have you shown the number 3?
Yep, that's what I'm on right now. It's the plot, the 15 by 10 foot plot.
Okay. Yeah, this is my garden in the backyard. Yes, okay, I understand it. And that's the year of 2015. And you can see there I was just working with this black Chernozem for about the first time. No, I'd worked in it before, but here in my backyard. The stuff at the back is squash. And what you see hanging down from the soffits of my garage are strong ropes holding a piece of hardware cloth that's 2-inch squares in it. And what you do is, as the plants grow up, they start to develop tendrils, so you try to get them to grab a hold of the screen that they can climb up, and they do that. As soon as they touch things, they start winding around and just sort of changing their whole growth way. So you end up growing squash plants in a vertical situation. And apparently they do that in Korea too. But I didn't know that until somebody told me that. And this was one of my first times doing it here. It's much more efficient use than letting the squash take up all the soil space in a horizontal way. I thought the thing was going to grow up over the rooftop of the garage, but it didn't do much, which was good because I didn't want to, and I put the wood up there, the plywood, so that the stuff would still have a cool space. So that's what that's about. Why don't you go on to the next one?
Okay, I did.
Number 4?
Yep.
Okay, these are harvests that I've had. The beets in the upper corner, they're all skinned out. Those are beets that I grew right here in that backyard. Same for the carrots underneath. I used to live in the country, and that wheelbarrow full of sweet mama squash, I would grow those in a horizontal situation, but you can grow them, as I showed you in the previous slide, in a vertical. And so I've done that now, and it works well. And you can read everything there as you go across that particular slide number 4. And we'll leave this on, and if you need to see it when you're asking questions, it'll be there. The next, what happened? The next one, slide 5. There's a picture. In 2015, I think there were about 17 of these big squashes. That's pretty productive. There's a squash on the left-hand side, and that at the bottom is what we call a manual that the Government of Alberta Agriculture put out, I believe, and it shows all the young seedlings, the shapes and so forth, so it helps you identify them, and I've got many other pictures as well. The best way to identify a plant in the field when it's a seedling is to put a stake beside it and watch it as it grows, because it's going to change form all the way through. And you will learn your plants individually that way. That's the best way. There are lots of books that'll show you pictures in the adult stage with flowers. But if you're learning weeds, which you have to do if you're going to control them, because they're competitors for what you're trying to grow for food. This picture on the right is the Prairie Urban Farm, showing lamb's quarters down here at the bottom. That's the same thing as quinoa, just about, lamb's quarters. Okay? And the one behind is amaranthus. And way in the distance is probably other things that I can't identify or remember. And then the other 2 slides don't have anything to do with that. It's just that I'm a builder, and this is a carrier for a canoe, and the canoe goes on top of the car like that, and this carrier turns upside down, fits on the keel. You strap it all down, and off you go, because with the wheels underneath here, you can go down just about any trail that's been cleaned up without logs and stuff like that. Cool. So you can get into a lot of different places. But that's irrelevant at this point.
All right.
Okay, so let's go back to the gardening bit.
Okay.
And
So this one, the number 4, or
okay, you want to ask questions?
question time? All right.
And then I'll give you a few clues on the crop rotation question and the fallow crops. And there's another one as well called cover crops. That's something useful in permaculture. So go ahead and ask your questions.
So I have a question. So you spoke of having been a lifelong gardener, and obviously you've studied it academically as well, scientifically. But I'm not clear. Do you have a permaculture design certificate as well?
No, I haven't got that. I just have the experience that I've indicated.
Okay. So
and because I'm 80 years old and I'm not about to get another certificate. I don't need it.
Okay. So one thing I've learned is that permaculture in some ways makes you unlearn some conventional gardening wisdom. So for example, you just spoke of weeds as being competitors of the things that you're trying to grow. But in general, in general, as I understand it, the permaculture attitude is that weeds are part of the ecosystem that your plants are growing in. And the main thing is to you don't want them you don't want the weeds growing to the point where they're blocking sunlight to the plants that you want. But unless they're rhizomatic spreaders, you can just cut the weeds down and next to the things that you want to grow, and just allow them to allow the roots to die and add organic matter to the soil that way.
Yeah, that would work in some cases.
What else was I? There was another point.
What about my
other point?
Okay, is it the point of having certain insects on the weeds, which then are helpful, end up helping you control other pests of the plants that you want to keep?
So
that's a possibility.
There's that, and also the fact that the just having as much organic matter in the soil, helps reduce soil erosion, keeps moisture in the soil, and I guess the principle that I absorbed is that there's nothing worse than a patch of bare soil, because that's going to blow away and dry up.
Yes, I agree.
The weeds are like they're like the scab that forms over a wound, and if you just keep like tearing off the scab, you're going to prevent that soil from being healthy.
Well, the point is that I think you're trying to make is that you need a lot of organic matter within the soil, and get it in there as soon as you can, because that's the basis of holding good nutrition for the plants that you're interested in. Right.
And the other thing, the other point that I wanted to make was you were speaking of the clay soil, the kind of clay that we find in the soils here. And
yeah.
So I took an organic gardening class, and the thing that I learned is basically no matter what's wrong with the soil, or no matter what the deficiencies are in the soil, you'll always improve it by adding more organic matter.
That's true.
So even if you've got a soil that on paper looks terrible for growing things in, you keep adding organic matter to it, and it will turn into productive soil, right?
Yeah, over time, and but we can't wait around forever, because it takes anywhere from 100 to 200 years to grow a mature soil in the sense of complete mineralization and maximizing the organic matter in place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a long time. We don't have the time for that or the ability to do it for large fields, for commercial operations.
Mm-hmm.
In your own garden, all the terms of permaculture that you're aware of will work well because you're working in a small space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a whole business of how do you control pests of the plants, like rusts, all the various fungi that would like to invade your plants. That's another issue that you got to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And the potatoes that we grow in Canada and most of North America now are all cell culture potatoes to begin with. In other words, the cell culture comes from individual cells of virus-free plants. And then you plant them, the tubers, in a field, and you can do that for about 3 years because the viruses are transmitted from the soils into the potatoes. And the potatoes get worse and worse. And the systems that we use in North America, we test for the level of viruses that are damaging to the tubers, its edibility, its safety and stuff like that, and the cost of producing the crop. So that is worked in, and that's one example of using crop rotation. After about 3 years, you got to go plant in another field, or you can't sell your potatoes because they're too virus-ridden.
So, Jerry, I have a question. You mentioned 3 types of systems. You said crop rotation, you said fallow crop, and you said another third one. Could you maybe talk about these different?
Cover crop, I think, was the term.
Cover crop?
Yeah, cover crops. I've been around the world in various places, and that's where I first really saw cover crops. In places like Spain, and Africa, and Greece, they use cover crops to protect the plants that they're growing underneath for food. In some cases, they're actually using them like olives. They can use them in wheat fields and so forth for additional food source.
So how does it work? You plant 2 plants in a field or a few plants, and they're supposed to support each other? So what are these 3 different types? Like, can you kind of give definitions for the 3 different systems you're talking about?
I don't understand your question.
So, like, I don't know the different. I don't know what crop rotation means here. What fallow crop means, I have no idea. And cover crops, you've started explaining. So, how does it work? What does each of these things do?
Well, you want me to say something about crop rotation?
I think we just want a definition for all of those 3 systems, Jerry. So what is crop rotation? What are fallow crops? And what are...
Well, in crop rotation, basically what you're doing is you're using the soil in a particular field for different crops every year. And if you have enough fields, then you can keep the microbes at the disadvantage because you keep removing the things that they like to infect. That's one aspect of the thinking. For fallow crops, like alfalfa and peas, these are crops which are nitrogen fixers, and they help increase the nitrogen value of the soil if you just leave them. And they're called fallow because you've left them. You may have grown them in the first place as a primary food for either humans, as in the case of peas, and alfalfa for cattle. So there's the crop rotation. Is that clear now or what?
Yeah, and then what's a cover crop? What does that mean?
Well, a cover crop basically is a second crop that grows up higher than the crop that you're interested in.
Kind of like the 3 sisters then, because it like creates that the shading system.
Okay, the 3 sisters. names of the mountains, aren't there? Or is that some
No,
term they
that's an
apply?
indigenous concept where you grow beans, squash, and I'm trying to corn.
Corn.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And each of
Okay.
them provide different nutrients and protective measures to each of them. So like the beans are another nitrogen fixer for the soil. Squash grows as vines, and the corn kind of provides a stalk and scaffolds for squash vines to grow. And I'm might be misremembering like the interrelationships because
That
it's
sounds right,
towards the
Miranda.
end of my day since I wake up really early in the morning.
That sounds right, though, Miranda.
Well, I've seen fields like that, and that's what you see. Yeah, the squash works its way around through all the corn plants in a horizontal sense and climbs a few of them.
Cool.
If you've got the space to do that, that's fine. But backyard gardens here in the city are small.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the vertical gardens are great. We've got lots of vertical garden space in our backyard too.
So if I'm thinking of like the Shemitah situation where we leave the land for a year, where you're supposed to not work it for a year, then I think the closest I can recognize here is fallow crop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing it's something you planted the year before and then you just let it be for a year and then go back to it.
It sounds that way because it sounds like crop rotation isn't leaving it. It's just planting something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a
So I posted, there's a Wikipedia article on cover crops, and I posted that on the chat.
Yeah, I think Alara just brought it up onto the.
Accidentally, but yeah, I did. I bring it up again intentionally. I forgot that I was still screen sharing.
Yeah. So Jerry, you were going to say something about this, I think.
what is it? This specifically?
The question of the fallow crop being the closest maybe to letting the land lie quietly for a year.
Fallow crops are, well, my understanding of fallow crops is that you have a crop that you're planting, like a grain or something like that, 1 year to get the maximum harvest, and then you just leave the field and you let it come back up as volunteers in the subsequent year. You're not trying to grow it, but in the case of alfalfa and other nitrogen fixers, you leave them there, they're actually working for you, building the soil nitrogen. The word fallow means leaving the field without, on purpose, planting a crop.
Yeah.
And from talking to Mike, am I correct in remembering that used to be common agricultural practice and now it is much less common to leave crops fallow?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't done a study on that, so I don't really know.
I think I might have linked an article into the handbook about that, where up until like the 80s, I think the historical article said it was common practice to let the land lie fallow every certain number of years, but now it's switched
Yeah.
to be
Yeah, that was.
more crop rotation because it's a higher way of production. Like they basically don't want to let the land rest because it's not as.
Yeah, but you have to keep the organic matter up, and a lot of people aren't doing that.
Yeah.
And the other thing about grain crops in particular that they've been doing over the last 20 to 30 years is they've been leaving the stalks longer to catch the snow and increase the moisture content in the spring.
Cool.
So, okay, so do people have any other questions on like local practices here relating to how we allow the land to kind of recuperate or?
No, I thought that was pretty informative though.
Mm-hmm.
especially about
Yeah.
the types of soil. I didn't really know much about that before.
Yeah, there are a lot of different kinds of clays,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon how long the soil has been weathered.
So you were telling about the stalks, and then what other ways are there of retaining moisture in the ground here? So like letting plants stay on the ground, I'm guessing that helps the moisture. But what else? Are there any other ways?
Well, anything that soaks it up, anything that
So
gives,
mulching is one practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
And
the
what is
earth
mulching?
dries here very quickly.
What is mulching?
Yeah, mulching helps. So mulching is when you put either like wood chips or dry grass or like leaf clippings on top of your soil, and it helps cool the surface of the soil basically, so that it retains the moisture underneath the layer of mulch. We do that in
Yeah,
our
you can use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do that, and then I turn it all in because the deciduous leaf litter actually increases the calcium and the magnesium content of the soil, which is good for the plants.
Yeah, we do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like thinking as we're talking, is like, would that be allowed during a Shemitah? Would we be allowed to cover the earth with mulch, for instance, to protect it?
Well, if it's naturally falling leaves, it would cover the soil anyways. So, borderline?
Borderline?
Like, it really depends on like how much interpretation we're going to take as to like, okay, are we going to say like probably mulching was fine as long as you just laid it out and didn't touch it for a year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it would also depend on the land because it would happen naturally and it would count as touching it to take the mulch off. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions here for Jerry on this subject? Because yeah, this gave, I mean, this, even just the way the earth is like and maybe you could say the name of the type of soil that we have here, the type of clay.
Yeah,
the Russian. That was interesting. The Cherno something.
You still there, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm still here.
What was
Jerry,
what
was the name of the soil here?
I can't hear anyone because you're all talking at once.
Okay, Laura, you go ahead.
We were just wondering what the name of the type of soil was again.
It's a Chernozem, CHERNOZEMLA, Chernozemla, which is the Russian. Means black. Cherno is black and Zemla is land, black land.
Okay.
And if you look at the map on the front end, you can see, and I think you can actually click on the map and you can enlarge it a little bit. Blow it up.
Okay.
And then move around on it.
I enlarged it, but I can't move around on it. Sorry, just one sec.
Okay. Well, the whole area from the lower east side in the corner, the Chernozems just change a little bit as you go up through the grays. It's around Edmonton. And then up towards the mountains, and further north, you get gray wooded soils. The soil system here in Canada is different than what they'd use to describe the same features in the USA.
Huh.
So basically, you have to learn two systems but we do that all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
French and English.
Metric and imperial.
Yeah.
Okay, no, this is good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jerry. That was really helpful.
Well, I hope it did help you.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it was super informative.
but you're going to learn the most by digging into the internet and trying to ask the questions there,
Yeah, it's true.
because there's lots
Or
of
digging into the
information on
soil.
the internet. Well, you
Yeah.
can do that. Yeah, dig into the soil. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. This was very good, and it's good to understand the actual, even the way the soil here works is very important to understand when we're dealing with this kind of question. So thank you so much for being with us here.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
Hope it's helpful.
Yeah, it really was. And
Thank you.
and this map is really cool too.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, well, you can keep that copy and look at it as much as you want.
Great, thanks, Jerry.
Okay,
Thank you, Jerry.
good talking to all you guys.
Good
Yeah,
talking
thank
to
you.
you too. Thanks for coming, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Robert, I wanted to ask you a question, and maybe other people who are fluent in this. Oh yeah, maybe you also want to. Maybe to give a little definition of permaculture and how, as a system, I think that would be important for us just before we close. We have a minute or so before, so.
You want me to take the slide down, or?
Yeah, maybe, and we'll just be ourselves here. Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, so permaculture as a general practice is, as I understand it, is about designing systems that meet human needs by mimicking features of natural ecosystems, or adapting aspects of natural ecosystems so that human needs can be met. I kind of have to polish up my presentation to present this in a really explanatory way, and maybe I could do that for next time or something.
Yeah, so maybe we can.
The basic idea is that whenever you have a complex system, the system has certain needs, and it produces certain things. So it gives certain yields, and the idea is to design a more complex system by putting together subsystems so that the needs of one system are met by the yields of another system, and vice versa. So you end up having a complex web of interdependency among the different elements within a system. So kind of a simple example of this is aquaponic fish raising. So fish produce manure, and if you take water with fish manure in it, you can use that to fertilize a garden. And meanwhile, the garden can filter the manure out of the water and oxygenate it, and that can be returned to the fish to provide them with clean water. So by coupling these two systems, where the needs of one system are met by the yields of another system, you create symbiotic relationships.
And okay, so I think maybe, I don't know, maybe next week or the week after, it would be interesting to think about this system, and specifically because I was really interested in what he said about the earth, the Chernozem. I love that name here. And when we're thinking of Shemitah and we're thinking of designing, because it means you can't arrive at Shemitah and just drop your, whatever you use to work the land. You need to prepare for it and plan for it. So this is about design. When it's about creating a system, we were talking about it, that you have to plan from the 6th year and then you continue into the 8th year. Like it's a whole system. It's actually a system of 7 years, one after. It's a design system. So it's actually about designing the field. Like I'm even thinking about the mulch situation. Like, do we want fields that have trees that just put the leaves on the ground and just leave them there for, to protect the land afterwards, not collect the leaves? Like, is this part of the way that we plan for Shemitah? And here in Alberta, where the earth dries up in 2 minutes.
It sounds like that could be similar to the cover crop idea. Even just from the brief 30 seconds that I saw the Wikipedia, it was talking about, that's what it was talking about, like, and he was talking, like, groves within wheat fields so that, like, you have some protection for on top of the soil. I think that's the idea of a cover crop, is it not?
Okay.
So actually, that the way he was using the term was not how I understand it, and it's not what the Wikipedia article is talking about. The Wikipedia article is talking about a crop you plant basically to keep soil covered. So like I was saying, bare earth is bad for erosion and other and soil depletion. So it's a crop that you plant basically to keep the soil healthy rather than because of the yield that you get from it. So for example, So, but I think in most traditional farming, even in North America prior to the industrialization of farming, mixed farming was very common.
Yeah.
So you'd have all kinds of intercropping going on. You might have, an apple orchard next to your wheat field, and as long as you don't have huge expanses of monoculture, the mixture of crops creates opportunities for biologically good things to happen, including wildlife to come in and help with food production as well.
For example of mixed crop is the indigenous concept of the three sisters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
So basically,
on all kinds of scales. Yeah.
The industrialization of farming led to monoculture, which led to more soil erosion and more items that needed to be done with farming in general.
Yeah. And desertification is one of the main results of monocropping.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need to start closing, but because it's almost 9. But from today, and I think this is also the reason I wanted us to start this conversation on permaculture, is because Shemitah forces us to plan ahead. Okay, you can't do agriculture by forcing the land to do something. You need to plan and make sure that the land can sustain itself without you being there forcing it to do something. So it's kind of recreating a system that is in a way a natural system. You're talking about the fish pond and then the earth, and that's just like a lake, basically. We just reinvented the lake in a sense almost. And so that's why I think when we're talking about Shemitah in the contemporary sense, we really need to understand permaculture and also to understand maybe other systems, earth-focused systems that respect like humans and living creatures and, growing creatures, to understand how we recreate the system nowadays. So maybe we can all research a bit, see if there's more types of agriculture that could be beneficial for this, and then bring that into what we continue. On food forests, yes, that's our favorite discussion, is food forests.
Sweet. Yeah, it's a big one in our house too.
Yeah,
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
Oh
We
yeah.
have a cherry tree in the
That's-
garden now.
That's a permaculture term, food and forest.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we've got
So-
cherry tree and we've got Saskatoons and raspberries and our neighbor has apples and yeah, it's great. It's happening.
So yeah, so I think these different ideas are, so we'll continue with the Shemitah. I want us to continue with the ancient study, but also I want us to bring in these renewed ideas because we need to learn how to plan for Shemitah to happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I had to say for today. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone.